welcome everybody to this lovely Sunday afternoon workshop, which is all about rituals. And wherever you are, whether you're watching live, which some of you are, I know, or whether you're watching this a little further down the line, do know that there is no time limit on this. Rituals are for any time. That's a big part of why I wanted to offer this session. I know that lots of us get really overwhelmed at this time of year, and I definitely count myself among that, where we hit New Year's Eve, get into January, and it's all fresh pages of journals and new systems, new habits, new gym memberships. We all tend to get really focused on newness and structure and routine and habit at this time of year, whether it's new habits or breaking old habits that we're wanting to let go of. I always find this time of year really, really challenging, and it's kind of interesting this year because, as some of you know, I spent the whole of the festive season ill in bed with COVID. I didn't actually test negative until January the 3rd, and it kind of forced me into this stillness that normally that time of year is so busy and so much kind of in the build up into the new year and into planning and into all the things I'm going to change and do and all the habits I'm going to embrace. And I just couldn't do that this year. And I really think more than ever, this has reinforced my personal opinion and feeling that the universe will always keep showing us the landscape that we need to progress personally. And that's really what drew me to sharing a little bit today on rituals and ritual practice, because for years, again, as many of you know, I practice with many different ideologies and traditions. I work in kind of the modern science of sound healing and shamanic practice, a little bit in Wiccan practice. I'm a crystal healer. I work with Reiki. I read astrology, more recently human design, and there's all these different things. And I think sometimes I overwhelm myself, so I must overwhelm you guys. And I think we often have this idea that we can't do all the things. And actually, I'm here to say you can, because one of the things human design has really taught me is that you can absolutely bring lots of different ideologies and constructs together and just pick from them what you need as and when you need them. And we can let go of this psychology that we have to do things in routine and in structure all the time. I've been following a lot of my friends on the hashtag 40 Days of Devotion on Instagram lately, so I really suggest looking that up if you're in this session. I'm not doing it myself. I kind of feel like I do it in some way. But it's been led by a girl called Blue, who is, I think she's based in Arizona at the moment, but she's kind of all over. And she has a lot of really interesting coaches and healers following her on this hashtag. And what she's doing is really focusing on spending time every day in devotion, in self practice. And that looks different every day. My friend Lara's doing it. And some days, she's doing a full Ashtanga practice and a cacao ceremony and a load of other stuff. And it's taking her 3 hours. And some days it might just be 4 minutes just in pause and stillness. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that rituals can be any shape or form that you like, that the whole idea is simply to plug into a practice that makes sense for you, that gives you some nourishment and you some opportunity for expansion and hopefully learning, growth, transformation, evolution, all those really good juicy words. And devotion ritual that can be enormous or it can be tiny. And some days it might be really tangible and really around crystals or something really structured and material and earthly. And some days it might be really, really, I guess, esoteric and really intangible. And you don't really know what that journey has been or what that ritual has been. It's just been a bit of time. So we're going to work through a few of them today. We're going to have a look at a few practices that over the years I've plugged into in different ways. I hope some of them will really resonate for you. Maybe there'll be something new that you want to add to your daily rituals or weekly or monthly, however you're working. And maybe there'll be some you already know about that you want to add something to share with the group and share with our community online, or simply see and hear them through a different tone. I did hear something recently. I can't actually remember what context it was in, but it was about the idea that even if you already know something, it can be really interesting to hear it back through a different lens. So that's something I really want to invite and embody and support today. So we are going to start with a little meditation to bring us into this space and to bring our energy into some kind of focus so we can really connect with the work we're here to do today. So wherever you are in your space at home or whichever part of your universe you're in right now, please come to a comfortable seat, whatever that looks like for you. And for me, I like to be cross-legged with my hips raised on a bolster and my palms open. And let your eyes come to a soft close. I'm going to keep mine open just so I can check you guys are all good. And wherever you are, taking a deep inhale in through the nose And feeling the breath rush down the back of the throat, down the spine, into the abdomen. Feeling your heart expand in the 360 degrees of your ribs. Pausing and hold, and then as you exhale, feeling the belly soften back towards the spine, feeling your shoulders drop and maybe your chin drop forward slightly as the air rushes past your bottom lip. Taking one more deep inhale. And one more lovely long exhale, releasing anything stagnant, anything old, anything that doesn't need to be with you this afternoon. And one more big, beautiful cycle of belly breathing. And then I encourage you to perhaps move into some Ujjayi breath if that's something you recognize. And Ujjayi is really about creating the sound of the ocean, so a deep breath in and out through the nose. And feeling that rush of breath in the back of the throat, making a sound like the waves breaking on the shore. Find yourself in your body, in your breath, noticing any points of snag or tightness, any points where it feels like there's heaviness or weight or challenge. Softly sending your breath, your exhale, to those parts of your being. Foundations of the room you're in, of the building you're in. And that golden cord is breaking down the earth beneath you. And very slowly it pushes its way down through the earth's crust, down all the way into the center of the planet. And on your next inhale, you're drawing all of that earth energy up from the center of the planet, all the way up through the earth's crust and through the soil and the crystals and the plants. Gathering all of that nourishment and drawing it all the way up into your body, into your being. And allowing that energy to sit within the center of your body, in the space of the heart chakra and of the solar plexus, of the space where the soul resides. Every breath drawing this energy up from Earth, from the planet, knowing that each of us in our own time and place is drawing that same energy, connecting to each other as well as to the grid of the universe. Breaths become deeper, and that powerful earth energy becomes the body and up to the crown and out through that door and out into higher consciousness. And now your breaths are moving from the center of the earth all the way up out into the cosmos, and as you begin your exhale each time, the energy of the cosmos is drawing down through that door in the crown, like a sparkling light waterfall down through the crown and the third eye and the throat and the heart and the solar plexus, the sacral and the root chakra, back down to earth, all the way back down into the core of the planet. A sacred conversation between the material and the spiritual. And just allowing a few more of these deep breaths to journey from ground to sky and out there into the universe, connecting to the universal grid, opening up that chakra atop your crown, allowing light energy to flow back from the cosmos, from the collective all the way down to be grounded back into earth, with you as the conduit, the tool, the partner, the communicator between the two. That little gentle opening has given you a little cleanse. I've been doing a lot of these meditations recently. I've just reconnected with a teacher in California who really does a lot of this work from planet to conscious grid, and I think it's really powerful. So I've borrowed that from her, and I'll put a link to some of her meditations in the notes I send afterwards if anyone enjoyed that and would like to do more. So we are here to talk about rituals in the context, actually, when I first wrote this workshop of 2022 and intentions, and really in response to resolution, because I feel that we get so tangled up with all the stuff we should be doing or think we should be doing, that we tell ourselves we should be doing. And perhaps in that journey we miss some of the nuanced opportunities to simply integrate really small things into our day-to-day that can make a difference. This mid-January time for me is also quite flat. I think it's tomorrow that's Blue Monday, that day of colour is the alternate to that. But it feels very blue at the moment here in Cornwall. It feels like strange sky, strange temperature. Everything's a little off-centre. If any of you are in parts of the world where that's feeling the same, I resonate. And I think by this time of the middle of the month, we're kind of a little bit worn out already with the new year. There's all that excitement, that initial anticipation and new beginnings and fresh starts, and even with what was going on this year with the pandemic and everything around that, there's still this excitement of being a new start. And by now we're already perhaps, you've had that first drink or skipped the gym for the first time. It's sort of beginning to settle back into normality again. And for me, this time of year is never really about New Year, which is why I rail against it and get angry about all these intentions and New Year structures. We're coming up next week on the 22nd of January. We have the Rave New Year, which is sounds much more dramatic than it is. And this is a construct of human design, where the human design mandala actually, the journey of the sun is a fixed place. It's not a time, it's actually a place. And that place is when the sun moves back to a certain gate in design, and every year that's the 22nd of January. So I quite like this idea that we shift out of our Gregorian calendar, a calendar essentially made by the Catholic Church, by white men for white men, some 400 years ago, and we kind of have this natural pause for 3 or 4 weeks before we come into an energetic new year. And I love that we're in the middle of that pause now. This feels like a really good time for more inward work and more inward journeying and reflection, and just seeing what lands before we commit to some of those really big new ideas and plans and projects. It's worth mentioning all the different calendars at this point, and that's really something I want to bring to this afternoon. My work is underpinned almost entirely by shamanic practice, which really responds to the wheel of the year, to nature's wheel. And that's really all about the rise and fall of light and dark, and the rise and fall of plant life in and out of the earth. And in shamanic terms, we consider the new year to be when the sun moves into Aries, spring equinox, which this year is March the 20th. So you could also argue that we have the first quarter of the year in lots of ways, almost the first 3 months of our calendar, Gregorian calendar that is, to simply reset while we're in darkness and hibernation still, before we come to that big fiery light of the Aries season, and the real return of spring. And that's when we start to have more light in a day than dark. For those who really love to practice with the Wiccan and pagan calendars, then it's what we often call Halloween, Samhain, which is October the 31st, and that's the new year, the witch's new year. Conversely, where they go deeper into darkness, where actually we have more dark than light, and it's in that darkness in the Wiccan practice and tradition that we can see more, that we can experience the revolutions of transformation. So that's just a handful of calendars. There's obviously the Chinese New Year, which this year falls on February the 1st, which is also Imbolc. So in the shamanic calendar, that's where we see the first little sort of seeds, and it's characterized by snowdrops popping through the earth around that time. And if you live somewhere where you have any snowdrops or crocuses, you might just start to see them, especially this year. It's so mild. So I guess the point of all of this is that our cycles can start whenever we want them to. We don't have to begin our rituals on a set date or run them on a set timeline, although it can be really nice to set yourself a challenge or a goal to maybe visit your rituals with a certain frequency. There's always going to be a calendar of some sort that you can align with. And part of what I hope you'll take from today is that you may notice that actually working with the lunar calendar makes more sense for you. For some of us, actually the solar calendar really is more logical. If you really practice spellcraft or paganism or work in the Wiccan tradition, then probably Samhain, October, is going to work. For me personally, I tend to work to March the 20th, so or around that weekend. It can be anything from the 19th to the 22nd. So January to March for me is really a time of kind of setting the scene, mise en scène. I can't speak properly yet after COVID. I'm so sorry, my words keep coming out jumbled. But January to March is a time to do this work of exploration for me, working out what I want to be doing this year, what feels good to move on to next, a time to take stock of the 9 months gone by before the light comes back. So I guess the point is really, you can choose exactly when you want your cycles to begin and end, and there's always a cycle. We have them through nature every day with the rise and fall of the sun and the rise and fall of the moon and the tides. That's, to me, what all of these natural cycles are for. So as we move through this session, I'm going to talk a little bit about all of the tangible physical tools that I like to use and that I've worked with over the years to activate and elevate these cycles and understand them more. We can take any questions that you guys might have, and then we'll talk about what we actually do with those tools. So I talked a bit about altar work, I think, in the preparation for this session. And I don't know if that really feels familiar to anyone. Like, what is an altar? What do we do with an altar? And actually, for a long time, my altar was a wine crate over in that corner, like a little wooden wine box with whatever I could fit on the top, which wasn't very much. And I've upgraded my altar. It's now an IKEA self-build piece of furniture behind me, which is extremely glamorous, as you can tell. Sage green, so a bit earthy. I need to move myself out of the way slightly without flashing you so you can see. Oh, too many crystal bowls here. So this is my altar, and for me, an altar is kind of defined by simply being a sacred space, a space that you can put all of your toolkit, where you can come in sanctuary or in retreat almost. And I find that whenever I'm feeling hectic and chaotic, that I come into this little space, and even though this room is far from serene, I'll show you on my other camera in a minute what's going on in the rest of the room, but there's a cat, at least one, a desk, 2 printers over there, a multitude of different cables and wires everywhere. So it's not that you have to have a sacred room, and it's lovely if you have a room or a yurt or a teepee or a studio. But actually, a sacred altar, a space, can just be a very small surface. It can be your bedside table, or it can be just a few square centimeters. It doesn't need to be big. So what I do think can be really nice is if you can find a corner somewhere in your house that you can designate as your sacred space, your altar. It simply becomes a tangible material place for you to go and connect with your practice, to connect with meditation, if you need to do some thinking, if you're into journaling. And I find that I just come here when I'm stressed out. I just come and sit here on this bolster by my IKEA furniture, and it makes me feel a whole lot more relaxed and gives me access immediately to the tools and the energy grids that I've created here. So altars really, for me, is simply about sanctuary and about honouring your own practice, honouring your own traditions. They hold your tools literally and figuratively. It's nice to keep all of your tools together. Energetically, it's really great if you work with things like crystals, for example, if you like having candles, to have everything kind of curated together so that the energy from each of these tools supports all the other aspects in that altar space. So I don't know if any of you have an altar already. If you do and you want to share anything, you can always feel free to drop something in the chat that we can talk about later on. You can also see that my altar is full of kind of bits that may look like they're nothing to do with the altar, but I deliberately have lights near it. I have got all of my various cards and practical essentials. You can never have enough lighters and matches on your altar. All of my various notebooks. I've got tuning forks here. I've got many crystals, obviously, a crystal grid that I'll show you a little later. Essential oils, cards, mala beads, plants, and obviously gongs and other instruments. So you can choose, I think, with your altar what you like to have on it. Some people keep it very much about things that are consumable and from nature, and will go and collect pebbles and shells, and I have a few of these as well. Some people really like to work purely with plants. Generally, I have a vase of flowers on here as well, but I was getting my hair tangled in it earlier trying to record, so I took it off. But something that really represents the cycle we're in. And I think the first point to say is that actually whichever cycle, whichever calendar you feel most connected to, will always guide you on what needs to be on your altar as you move through the year. It's really, for me, about plugging you into the cycle. So, when we're in the summer, I tend to have roses and bright coloured flowers. My incenses are kind of quite light and fragrant. In the winter, certainly like in Scorpio season, everything's really dark and aromatic. And actually you can just see these dead roses in the corner, which are a hangover from Scorpio season. And everything takes on a really different quality. Let me check my notes so I don't go completely off-piste. And as I said, for me, everything here is underpinned by shamanism, but perhaps if you're more into Wicca, you may be working a bit more with recipes or spells or cauldrons or crystal balls, and that will make a lot more sense for you. One of the things that I really always have on my altar personally is cards, tarot and oracle cards. And I don't know how many of you guys use these a lot or have used them at all. But they, for me, are really a wonderful way to connect with your own intuition, which is the other big thing I think altar work is for. It's really about supporting your own ability to get out of your body and into your higher self. So as we move through, if any particular tools resonate, you want me to show them in more detail, just let me know. I mentioned flowers and seeds and plants. So for anyone who's not sure what shamanic work is, it's really the practice of being in cycle with nature, with the worship of nature and of Earth, of Gaia, the Greek goddess name for Mother Earth. And we're all hardwired differently. Astrology teaches us, many practices that I'm going to talk about teach us that we're all different. We know this obviously practically, but elementally, some of us are really at home in water and we're really good with change and we're really good at flowing with things. Some of us are very at home in fire when we're doing, we're being active and we're generating ideas and things are moving fast. We all can really recognize, like I recognize my dad, my sister, for example, incredibly earthly, like very grounded. They like stability, they like structure, they do like a lot of routine. And if you're a very earthy person, then perhaps a set daily routine and ritual will work for you. And what I think altar work and shamanic work really offers us is a chance to ensure that we're all connecting to all of those elements. Like I know that I'm all water and fire, don't have a lot of air, don't have a lot of earth. So I really consciously try to add those elements to my life by bringing them onto my altar. That's why I've got lots of lovely plants here, lots of crystals, which are very much, overall they can be attuned to different elements, but by definition a crystal is from the earth, so it's an earth energy. And it's really a way for me to remind myself I need that earth to bring up my balance, so that I'm not operating entirely from the kind of emotional response of water or the active response of fire. So you can, again, as we go through, take notes, see how you feel. What's your elemental tuning? And I know some of you I've done astrology readings for. You have your astrology from elsewhere, or it's something you're familiar with already. That can be a really good clue. You know, if you're all Leo and Aries and Sagittarius, you know, a lot more fire is going to drive you, and you probably don't need as much fire on your altar and in your practice because you innately hold a lot of it. You know, if you're like me, mostly water and air or something else, and you don't really have any earth, you haven't got any Virgo or Taurus or anything in your chart that helps to ground you, then you may find that, like me, you need to really find those pieces in your altar work so that you feel in flow. I hope that makes sense. I'm really aware that my brain's a little foggy still, and I'm likely to wander off piece a bit. So let me know if I am. The last thing I want to say about altar work as a wider concept is that it's in constant flux and constant change. And those of you who I talk to a lot will know I have always a lot to say when people are using crystals as kind of paperweights or not moving them around their house. You know, we sell crystals in my shop and I sell them privately, and they're never intended to be used as home decor. I mean, often they are. I use them for home decor, but I constantly move them. I'm constantly, you know, picking up my crystal and going, hey, where do you want to go today? What do you want to do today? It takes a long time moving all my crystals around, but they don't all need to be in the same place. And they are in constant change and constant flow, as is your altar. So what I've got going on here is very much an altar that's actually about Venus. For me at the moment, I'm working a lot with the Venus retrograde we're in. So the colours, the crystals I've got going on, the energy that's up here is very Venusian. When that retrograde comes to an end towards the end of January, I'll be really changing this up, and I'll be moving, you know, changing the colour of the candle, changing the oils and the scents. I'll be moving the grid around. I'll be bringing different instruments into this space. I'll be changing this Chiron gong for a different gong that I feel will be more appropriate when we're moving into the next phase. Just going to let somebody in. So you can change your altar anytime you like, and again, it's up to you. Sometimes changing it monthly really works. Sometimes you might want to stick with the moons and maybe change it on the new or full moon. I do tend to adjust my grid according to the lunar energy as well, and it doesn't have to be all of it changing. You might just want to take a couple of things off and put a couple of new things on. So it's really, altar work for me is so much about just tuning into the prevailing energy. What do I need now? And now might be this day, this week, or this month. You can check in as little or as much as you like. I wrote here that I do all of that, so I should probably tell you that. I draw at the beginning of every month. I draw a new card for the month. So this, rather worryingly, is my card for January. So I still work on the Gregorian calendar. You know, we are all still doing things based on what's in our iCal and our actual tangible diaries. So I still like to plug into that, even though energetically I don't really use the Gregorian calendar much. So I always do a card on the first of the month, and that's my theme to come back to over and over again as we move through the month. Every day when I come to my altar, to my space, I'll just check back in with this card and see how I'm feeling about it now. I pulled this on New Year's Day, Seven of Swords. It's all about what lies beneath, secrets, and how holding things inside may not serve us to the best of our abilities, and how to think about that. So that's been a big theme for me as I've moved through the month. I've been coming back to this again and again, and I'll change this one up on February the 1st. I also pull a card every single day. So again, kind of Gregorian or sun calendar. Change the grid for moons, change the flowers and the calendars on shamanic holidays. So you can really adapt as much as you want. So do anyone have any questions about any of that before I plough onwards? I haven't done a live for so long. It feels so strange. And everything in my room's changed since I last did them. So let's talk about crystals, because this is a really fundamental kind of aspect of most people's altar. Crystals have become crazy popular the last couple of years. I think probably everyone on here has some or has engaged with them in some way. And they can at the same time be really tangible and really confusing and really unavailable to some of us. Crystals, as I mentioned earlier, are technically earth energy. They are characterized as being from the ground. They predominantly are from the ground. So when you're looking to represent earth on your altar, and shamanically it's nice to represent earth, water, fire and air somewhere, crystals by their very presence will give you earth. So even if you haven't got any plants or shells or pebbles or feathers or soil or anything else earthy, then just one little crystal will help you plug into that energy. But of course, you can choose crystals for your altar based on wider elemental connotations. For example, an air crystal might be fluorite, or a heart crystal might be rose quartz. A carnelian would be very fiery and solar plexus. And this overlaps as well with things like astrology. There'll be crystals for each sign, crystals for each season. For example, my grid up here is very much a kind of a spring grid, even though I'm very premature with that, I realise, but that's the energy I'm working with right now. So they're really a great tool, and you don't need to spend loads of money on them. I'm not always a massive fan of tumble stones. Tumble stones would be these kind of little small pebbles, like marbles. They often are made in China and offer off a mass production machine, which we'd rather avoid. It's much nicer if you can maybe invest in some which are hand polished or hand mined or have a little bit more provenance, in the same way that it's nice to buy from your local refill shop as opposed to Tesco's. But we all have to do both. We occasionally are unable to make the choices we'd like to, and tumble stones, I think, is one of those spaces that you can get lots of them really cheap, that give you an opportunity to plug into different energies and perhaps work out which crystal is going to be the one you do want to invest in at a higher level, and get maybe some more special, interesting, rough, hand polished pieces like this. So where we are at the moment, calendar wise, in Capricorn season, Capricorn energy is all about structure, rules over the bones, and the anatomy, the skeleton in the body. If anyone here is a Capricorn sun or a rising as I am, you'll know that Capricorn energy is so much about kind of goals and organising and plans and a good chunk of ambition. It's the real leadership energy of the zodiac, so leading yourself forward. And it's no surprise that even though our Gregorian calendar isn't really built to reflect this, that this time of year is so much about that structure and that planning. So crystals that might be really supporting at this time of year include things, for example, like smoky quartz, which is one of the most grounding, structured crystals, and it's also really great for helping us to bring the chaos of overthinking from our mind and plug it down into earth. Other crystals at this time of year are really heart-centered ones, which I find really helpful, like rose quartz or emerald. Rose quartz for healing and harmony, really good for self-forgiveness and giving yourself a little bit of a break. Very useful around resolutions. And emerald, which is the stone of successful love. So at the moment, Venus is retrograde and everything to do with relationships is front and center. So although we wouldn't traditionally use loads of heart crystals in Capricorn season, right now it makes a lot of sense, and I can feel that from the energy that I'm downloading, that this is really, this heart-centered approach is what we're really looking at this January. Crystals can be, you can certainly just use them inanimmately over here, and I do, but a really beautiful way to work with them is to hold them in your meditation. So when we started off with that meditation with the bowls at the beginning, one of the things I would normally do is to use a palm stone, something like this, and just have that in the palm of your hand as you're holding the meditation. Depending on what you're calling in, whether you're trying to ground or elevate, what you're manifesting, you can choose a crystal to tune into that. So for example, light jade, serpentine, is for health, good health and abundance and good luck, traditionally used in Chinese medicine, of course. You might want to work, if you're manifesting, with carnelian, stone of fire. This is such a lovely one, and you can't see so well in this light. But carnelian is all about setting ignition, your rocket fuel, your fire, getting things moving, getting them off the start line. So at this time of year, if you are really hell-bent on those resolutions, carnelian is a really supportive crystal to work with. And if I was using crystals in meditation, I would generally be using them simply in my palms and holding them into the center of my hands, which is a really amazing place to connect with our inner energy, to receive our Reiki energy if we're attuned or working towards that. And it's really interesting how crystals change temperature when they're connected to our physical form. They may start out really cold and get really hot and feel like they're fizzing in your hands, or the other way around, they may feel really warm and then they get colder and colder, like almost intangible, and almost sink into your palms. Often you don't realize by the end of your journey, your meditation or your sound bath, that you're still holding them. They've almost integrated their energy into your hands. And particularly if you struggle a little bit with energy in a physical sense, although it sounds insane in some moments, holding a crystal is somehow going to connect you to energy. It really is. It's simply a really subtle vibration compared to the physical vibrations that we feel when we kind of stub our toe or in a sound bath. You know, we sense those in a really hi-fi way, and these are just way more subtle than we're used to sensing. It's asking us to call in senses which are way more, you know, I guess, nuanced and soft in our anatomy. We just don't connect with them as much. So crystals in meditation, great way to work with them. Another way I really like to work with them is in yoga and shavasana. Maybe if I'm going into a class, I'll choose something I really want to activate my practice. Again, if it's a vinyasa, if it's a flow, something hotter, then maybe carnelian is a really good option. If you're working in a much more yin way, then something like labradorite can be really, really beautiful. Really wonderful for getting into the third eye. So labradorite, as a general rule, is a really great meditation crystal. And amethyst, of course, really easy to access, relatively cheap to get hold of a good piece, is really amazing for activating that third eye chakra. And if I'm using a crystal for yoga, which is in so many of our daily rituals and morning practices, I often just have it at the top of my mat so that I'm connecting with its energy, I'm seeing it, it's seeing me as I flow through, and then maybe at the end in shavasana, I might place it on my heart or maybe my third eye. So really simple ways of working with crystals. If you are a bath fan, as I certainly am, then you can put your crystals in your bath. My partner often wonders why he goes into the bathroom and there's a load of rocks, as he says, in the bottom of the bathtub. I'm sure everything's going to fall. But one of the ways I really like to work with crystals a lot is through grids. So I'm going to show you with my other camera. Hang on a second. Here. Of course, it doesn't want to let me do it the way I want to. So you can see this grid. It's just on the other camera. So when I work with this grid, I would normally hold my hand over the center. I come to this angle. The center crystal generally is nice if it comes to a point. You can see this one. We call it a generator point. Generates high energy. And what a point does at the center of a grid is it really draws all the energy from the rest of the grid into that center point and lifts it up in a single stream. So when you're working with the Reiki channel that's potentially in your hand or it's activated in your hand, you'll be able to feel the energy of that whole grid, and I can feel the heat kind of in my hand already from that. So usually my morning rituals, I like to come into this space. The first thing I do is just do a few deep breaths, maybe take a few sound bowl moments as we did at the beginning together. And then I come, put my hand over the grid and start to connect with that energy and bring myself into my sacred space. And I'll just show you while I'm here the rest of it. Tuning forks, various journals, little pendulum, sorted things to burn. These are my master crystals, which are from various teachers and guides. I have a few talismans that are to do with a guide, my monthly card, my daily card, more things to burn, oils, mala beads, plants, and we'll come back to those in a moment. I'm just going to stop this video and come back to my main screen. I realise I've been sat in a very unpleasant position through that. So crystal gridding is a kind of a strange art form, and it is an art as well as a science. What we're really doing when we put that grid together is creating a vortex of energy. So when I'm working with this grid, for example, which is Metatron's cube, this is a really protective grid. It's the one I use the most. Sometimes people like to use the flower of life a lot, and that's really nice for manifesting and new moons. But for me, Metatron, and you can connect, of course, to the Archangel Metatron, for protection and accessing higher consciousness, is a really beautiful grid to work with all of the different shapes of nature. So you can see within here the triangles and tetrahedrons, the octahedrons, all of the building blocks of life are represented in this one piece of sacred geometry, which is why it's my favourite. You would always put a point or whatever is the kind of the key story, the anchor, the theme of your current practice at the centre. So I have a whole range of points, which I've just realised are hidden behind that gong, so I'll show you later. And they're kind of the big hitters. So quartz, rose quartz, smoky quartz, amethyst, there's an apatite in there, citrine. And I'll always choose the one of those really based on the element of where we are. So at the moment I'd be very much in earth, and it would be the smoky quartz at the centre. And then you can plot your crystals onto the lines, into the spaces, and it's really intuitive. There isn't really a right or wrong. There's plenty of books on how you can grid, and ideas for this grid is for health, this one is for manifesting, and again I'll send you some links to those if that interests you. But in reality, for me, it's about sitting with yourself in your journal for a few moments going, what am I calling in today? What do I need? Like actually on the grid I've got here, there's fluorite, because God knows I need focus after COVID and I can't speak properly. Lots of fluorite to help keep my focus. I've got some green aventurine on there, which is all about transformation. It's a time of year when I'm really looking at these rituals about shifting my practice along, really changing how I'm doing things, and doing that with healing and gentleness. I've got citrine because that is the crystal for abundance. It's really great for business. One of the things I'm personally working on right now is reshaping both of my businesses. So that feels like a crystal that is ever present in my grids at the moment. That feels like a thread that's carrying me through the season. I've put rose quartz at the centre because of that Venus retrograde I mentioned. And I've also got a little bit of carnelian because I feel like I need to get active again after I've been quite static for the last 2 months. And then some clear quartz, which is such a handy thing to have in bulk. I've got here a whole little bowl of clear quartz that is again relatively easy to get hold of in good quality and without too much expense on the abundance front. And it's really a great binding crystal to kind of link all of the others together. And then really what you're doing is linking them all together on a grid. And when you hold your hand or both hands over that grid, you can draw the energy of all of those intentions, all of those properties into your hands, and then be using them in your meditation and your yoga practice when you root to earth, or in self-Reiki, which we'll talk about a little later. So for me, a grid is such an amazing way of nothing else, of going, okay, what do I need? And the course of selecting crystals for your grid is really helping you to make those identifications and assertions in your practice. So I really suggest getting a hold of one of these if you haven't tried it before. You can also just print them off the internet. You can draw them yourself. It can be really simple. Another way of working with crystals I wanted to share with you is using very dirty astrological grid. This is, I'll show you a little closer up. God, it's so dirty, I'm so sorry. You might be able to recognise, if you know the signs of the zodiac, the wheel showing all of the zodiac symbols, the big ones around the edge. And I usually have one of these on the go, which really is for me to help my astrology practice. I have a stone for each one of the planets, and then every day when I come in here, I have a look at my app and I look at where the planets have moved and I move the stones accordingly. So it's kind of like a constant living map of the sky. So the course of doing that helps me to think, oh, well, what's Mercury doing today? Mercury's gone retrograde. That's a call to assess my communications for the next few weeks, to assess what's going on with the way I communicate for me and my business and my relationships. Or I might see that the sun's about to move into Aquarius, so I know that's a call to really tap into my spiritual practice, to be looking at where can I be a bit more 5D, a bit more ascended, how can I bring something new into play rather than stay in my stasis. So having those crystals using an astrological sense could also be really helpful. And I think again the purpose of all of this is to get you to look at what's going on, like what's happening in here. What do I want to bring to my practice, and what do I want to call into my practice, and what do I want to let go? So hopefully that makes little bit of sense. Other ways you can work with crystals include your chakras. Some of you may be really familiar with the chakras, and if you are, you'll probably already know some of the crystals that connect. If not, it's a really good way to learn and a good way to get used to the idea of your energy body and that innate awareness and intuition that's in all of us, that we don't see on scans, we don't see it visually with our eyes, so often we need persuading that it's there. And working with crystals can really activate and open each chakra. A lovely way to do this is to spend 5 minutes just lying down on your yoga mat or on your bed, and you can place a crystal on each chakra. Quite hard to do the root. And if you're not sure the rainbows are a good reference point, you can just go by colour. You don't need to know the crystals. You can simply think, okay, reds and oranges and yellows live down here, greens and blues, and then purples. And it's a really simple, straightforward way to activate your energy body, your aura, and to start noticing if you can feel movement or vibration. Often if I put a rose quartz here, I feel it beginning to move, and often it just jumps off my body. So those simple little tactics are really great ways to help you tune into your energy. Crystals. Does anyone have any questions about crystals in terms of rituals before I plough on? One of the things I was going to mention, of course, is cleaning them. It's really important, especially when you use crystals all the time, to make sure that you don't just kind of leave them sat out, or if you do, that you clean them either with salt. You can leave them out in the full moonlight, although I tend slightly to lean less into that. It can be a bit more of a Wiccan practice. Cleaning them with water, as long as they're not anti-water. So anything that ends in ite, fluorite, selenite, for example, kyanite, is fibrous and will dissolve in water. So don't do that method. The way I usually do it is singing bowls, actually, because it's consistent with my personal practice. I might just set the bowl ringing and then hold my crystal inside it, and the vibrations from the bowl, the frequencies, come into the crystal and shift any negative energy and pull it out. So the science of sound, as I know many of you have heard me talk about, is that the frequencies we work with in this space literally shift positive or negative to positive, rather, and that's in a physics ionic sense as well as in an energetic sense. So for me, just being in a room, and I have all my crystals in this room, and even the ones the rest of the house get brought up here when I'm playing, so they naturally get cleansed in that process. So it's really important to remember to cleanse your crystals if you're going to use them in ritual. Tarot and oracle cards is something I know people wanted to hear about, so we will dive into those. Why do I love them? So I love tarot and oracle because it just, for me, is such a good way of being accountable to myself. As I mentioned earlier, we all are hardwired energetically and elementally in different ways. Some of us will always be more called into action if we're more fiery, and will lean naturally into responding to the parts of our life that ask for action and manifesting and doing and igniting and coming up with ideas and being creative. And that's amazing. But if you are completely, or not completely, but if you are much more on that fiery side, maybe you really have to go and look into how you ground and how you make your structures. So for me, tarot is about not being able to choose which version of yourself you see. There's 78 cards in a standard tarot deck, and you obviously have so many different options within that of the message you might receive. Now, I know I could sit here all day and look at messages about career and business and activating work-related stuff, but I would probably not lean into areas, such as relationship areas, as easily. But if I pull a relationship card out of the tarot deck, it's telling me clearly that this is an area to focus on. So I love the accountability of not so esoteric as the universe choosing for me, but my intuition reminding me that I need to look at different parts of my life. So let's have a look at tarot and oracle. I need to take a break for speaking as well for a moment to get some water on board. Right, let's get some tarot and oracle cards out. Do people know the difference between tarot and oracle? I feel like that's a thing we should probably start with. Let's have a look. So a tarot deck, as I mentioned, is traditionally 78 cards. A lot of modern decks have a couple of bonus cards that are kind of at the author or the illustrator's discretion. The one I use the most of all is the Moonchild Tarot, which I'll show you here. It's very beautiful, nice, big, chunky cards, and very easy to shuffle, which if you start to use them a lot, you will learn is pretty much the priority. How easily can these be shuffled? This one has 81 cards, so the traditional 78 plus 3 extra. Tarot, and you'll, I'm sure, be beginning to notice this is my ongoing theme today and always, is elementally themed, as also astrologically. So the 4 suits represent the 4 elements. So the cups represent water, pentacles, which sometimes are called coins, represent earth, and so on. And then within each of the 4 suits, we have 10 numbered cards, often called the pips, which are about kind of our journey within that element. So for example, the 10 cups, aces, which are low, up to the 10 of cups, would be about our emotional journey, from beginning our emotional exploration to kind of mastering our emotions. And then the court cards, which vary from deck to deck. In this deck, they are Knight, Page, Queen and King, but they often are named according to themes in the deck. I've got one deck in which they're son, daughter, father and mother, for example. And these ones are really more about individuals. So those cards will call us into, rather than looking at our general experience in the way the numbered cards do, they call us into looking at the individual people or ourselves as an individual protagonist in a certain scenario. You then probably have all heard about the major arcana. I just randomly picked one off the top. This is Judgment. Particularly tricky card sometimes. So the major arcana are 22 cards which are not within the elements. They are the archetypes, the story cards. Here's another one that people love to hate, the Devil. And these cards, the major arcana, are the ones that really concern with our journey over life as a whole. So we start with the Fool, which is not about our intellectual acumen, but the Fool is really all about kind of youth, being born new into the world, into a blank canvas with a starting point. And as the Fool goes on his or her journey, he journeys through experiences such as the Lovers, which is how we learn to relate to another person, that kind of accommodating that binary yin and yang aspect of life. You might come across Strength, which is the fire card, which is all about activating our leadership skills and our ability to activate. It might come across the Hanged Man, which is the really interesting one actually. It's one of the major arcana cards, which is all about the idea that we cause our own drama. We are the master of our own story. We can get ourselves out of any situation we're in. And the Fool journeys through all of these 22 major cards until he reaches the final one, which is the Universe. And that's where that Fool, who was born new into a blank canvas with no experience of life, has now picked up all of the big life lessons and has found himself or herself at the end of his journey and ready to ascend onto something new. So the Universe is such a beautiful card when you get that one. It's really a special card that's all about that kind of rising up to your next level. It's often called the Enlightenment card. So tarot, in terms of a daily ritual or a weekly ritual or a monthly ritual, can work really easily. I'm really simple at the moment. I just pull one card a day and I will look at that card, and the trick is not to straight away dive for the guidebook, no matter how tempting that is. And I usually do my cards after I've activated my crystal grid and I've got Reiki channel going, so I'm feeling quite fizzy in the hands. The trick is really to spend time with your intuition. Before you pick a card, what do I want to know today? What would my soul have me know? If you're thinking about something quite earthly or a physical thing that's going on for you, what does my body want me to know? Think about where you're calling intuition from. You know, are you calling it emotionally? What does my heart want me to know? And just spend a moment before dividing the deck in any way you like. Some people go for the card that's on the bottom of what they've pulled. I always turn over the next one. 5 of Swords, that's a tough one. It's a model question, I didn't ask myself one there. And that one card for me is then usually my journal prompt for a day. So rather than spend hours deciphering what does this card mean, I usually look at it and go, how does it make me feel? In this particular card, which I'll show you because it's an easy example, it's not the most cheerful, is it? So very immediately I sense apprehension. It looks a little bit like self-burdening, or like the swords pointed inwards to our protagonist, to the journeyer, the seeker, indicates a degree of kind of self-abuse or anxiety. She's kind of fixated on this skull, which suggests something old. Swords is the air suit, so this is all to do with mental clarity. So from that, straight away I'm thinking, well, this is old thoughts, old programming. What do I need to know about old programming mentally, which is holding me in a place of discontent? And then straight away, that's my meditation for the day. That's my journal prompt. And it's the thing I'm going to come back to in moments where I'm pausing or brushing my teeth or waiting for the kettle to boil. And that way, ritual for me moves and transcends from this space, from this altar, out there into the real world and into a place where I can actually start to activate it, if that makes some sense. So of course, there's so many ways to work with tarot, which is not just one card. Usually I find on bigger events, so birthdays, full moons, new moons, shamanic festivals and so on, I will generally do a wider spread, and there's infinite places you can resource spreads, so I'm not going to go through loads of them now. But simple ones, 3 card spreads for example, can be body, mind, spirit, past, present, future. Things work really nicely in 3s. The classic Celtic cross really gives you a depth answer to a question, where it asks you to spend time as you're pulling each card working through all the different perspectives from which you could see a challenge. And actually, that's kind of the magic of tarot. It's not about the cards giving you the answer, it's about reminding you that there's 10 different ways to see one problem and asking you to consider those ways for yourself. So it really is a very practical tool. It's not at all necessarily just the domain of the gypsies, which I always thought as a kid. Other decks that I really like, or cards that I really like to work with, are oracle decks. So let's go a bit closer. These are a couple that I work with a lot. This one, Then and Now deck, is a creative deck, and it's by a photographer and art director. So her cards are very much about giving you a single word: craft, eclipse, soul, intuition, for example. Let's pick one from the middle. Pilgrimage, that's a good one, isn't it? And oracle decks don't have that same 78 card structure. They're not as complex in some ways. Tarot, just like any language, doesn't have to be complex. Once you understand the structure, and you can always refer back to the guidebooks that come with decks, it's really very fluent and very easy to interpret cards. Oracle decks are just that little bit easier. They don't have a set structure. They just have usually a word or an image, which is a little bit more tangible, a little bit easier to connect with. For lots of people who've maybe, like, for years I avoided tarot because I'd had some really rubbish experiences at fun fairs as a kid with tarot, and it freaked me out. So I found oracle cards a lot easier to connect with. You can also find, if your rituals like mine often a little bit on the fly, a little bit short, something really simple like a little crystal oracle deck, which just gives you a crystal name and then the interpretation. Like Veracruz amethyst would be contentment, for example. Pyrite would be willpower. And that can just give you a word for the day, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something you would choose for yourself. Like, you might find that you have willpower on a day you've assigned for rest and for healing on a Sunday, which might feel a little counterintuitive. Or perhaps a resting or healing card on a day that's all about endless Zoom meetings and work all day. And I feel that those things really come up in our rituals when it's simply about remembering to take a different perspective and see things from another ideology or angle. And that's what I think is really beautiful about working with cards, because we can all in our day-to-day lives try and set the theme of a day ourselves, and that's our mind really telling us what to do, whereas working with something like cards lets that intuition guide us a little more. So I really recommend working with cards. If it's not a practice you've picked up before, there's so many decks, and I mean so many. You can find themes that really can appeal to you, themes that you know nothing about that you might want to explore. For a lot of people who are interested in crystals, I suggest this little one because it is kind of a learning tool as well as a guidance tool. And it's really, I think, a beautiful way to tap into your intuition. And if you struggle to journal, which we know through much scientific research is such an amazing way of managing our mental health, particularly anxiety and stress, picking a card in the morning can just give you a theme or a keyword to help you unlock some of that flow and let some of those words come through you and out onto the paper. So I really encourage you to give them a spin, add them to your rituals. For me, cards are such an integral part of this altar. As you can see, cards of the year, cards of the month, cards of the day. And particularly if you're busy or simply got a lot going on in any sense, in any different kind of energetic sense, it can be really lovely to come back to these, just pop in as the day over the course of the day, or have a picture on your phone that you can come back to, just to give yourself an anchor to come back to your daily theme or the message that is going to be helpful for you to take on. Hope all that makes sense. Pop these up here for me. Okay. I can't believe I've talked this long without coughing like crazy. It has been, I must finally be turning the corner. Other favourite things. Okay, what time are we on? Okay, guys. Other rituals I really want to share with you today, and I think could be really supportive as we move into this new year, are around sound, of course, and we'll be enjoying some sound together in an hour or so. I won't touch too much on the science of sound today because that's not really why we're here. But what sound does do is adjust our natural harmonics, our natural frequency. It can really help bring us into a state of calm, of serenity, and of availability for transformation and ascension. I leave these crystal bowls up in this room all the time, slightly unnerved between what the cat might do and me coming in here and tripping over them. But I find, again, much like the altar, that if I feel a little stressed out, confused, almost if I need to just break up my day in between different tasks, coming in here in just a couple of moments of a certain frequency can really reset me. And you do not need any crystal bowls for this, obviously. If people are interested in crystal bowls, I can give you resources for getting hold of them for a lot less cash than you might think, and they are a really, really beautiful way to connect with sound. Himalayan bowls are a bit cheaper, a bit easier, a bit less breakable. So depending on how many pets, kids and errand partners you have at home, often these can be a little bit more manageable. Even before I was a sound therapist, 10, 15 years ago, I used to have a bowl I just liked to, it's a bit loud, that I just liked to do this to, just literally sound and have the sound with me. And just giving your mind something really clear to focus on actually is a really useful thing in your daily rituals. The singing bowls are really helpful if you have them. Tuning forks, if you have them, are one of science's best kept secrets for managing your blood flow, for the nitric oxide being released into your blood, which is really supportive for all sorts of things, but mostly to do with your circulation, your respiratory performance. There is just unbelievable science around how beneficial tuning forks can be, and vibroacoustics, again, really, really accessible price-wise, and I'm going to do a couple of workshops soon on how to integrate those specifically in some daily practices. But for me, a simple daily practice that's literally a cleanse, tone, moisturize is doing this. So hard to explain how that feels, but it's simply a reset to your aura and a reset to your energy system, immediately decluttering mental fog. So I should really walk around with these all the time right now. However, if you do not have and are not interested in tools and instruments, you already have the most important instrument and the only one you'll ever need in here. Your voice is such a wonderful tool to work with in terms of ritual. If anyone is a yogi or practices mantra in classes or as part of other meditation practices, you probably already have done a little bit of chanting here and there, perhaps just ohms. If you're comfortable chanting an om, 3 ohms can really, on a practical and physical and physiological level, open up the throat and bring a level of openness into the heart space, which allows acceptance, healing, harmonizing, which are all really useful things to take into your day. If chanting Om seems religious or otherwise weird or not available to you, you can just hum. And this is something I do quite a lot, and I do a lot in the car. I'm one of those people, if you're next to me at a roundabout or traffic lights, you'd be like, okay. Lots of humming and just sounding, because it feels good. It actually, in the way that you wake up in the morning and feel really stiff and stretched, or for me it's a downward dog at the moment, I can't open up my lower back enough right now. And that's just such a good feeling. Actually humming and just putting some sound through your throat and your chest can really open up the heart space and mean that your daily rituals, when you get into them here in your altar, in your sacred space, are really activated. And that humming, that sound or singing from your own voice is also going to be a cleansing tool, changing the vibration, sending frequencies out of you into and around all these beautiful items you've gathered in your altar. And you're going to be able to really do your own cleansing of your body and your space. So I don't know how to really demonstrate humming with the microphone I have today. I'm not sure it's going to pick it up. But you will definitely do some in the sound bath later. But don't worry if you don't have instruments. Your voice is perfectly good enough. Even singing along to tracks that you enjoy that don't have to be spiritual tracks, or humming along to things that you don't know about. It can be really nice if you don't mind hang drums or more spiritual tracks on Spotify. There's tons of them. And just starting one playing and just making noise along to it. If you're into a bit of movement, embodied movement is having such a moment, and kind of shaking, literally shaking, not dancing. Shaking is doing a very similar thing in terms of clearing stagnant and static energy from around you. And again, these are things I'm not going to say I come in here and shake and hum every morning. I really don't. I usually come in and bash a singing bowl because that's a bit quicker and easier. But I do try and once a week at least do a good shake and hum and just kind of sing and howl a bit, wait for everyone else to be out of the house before you do that. Usually it sends the cat running anyway. And it's a really, really beautiful way to wake up the body and to wake up your ritual space and keep it fresh and keep it engaged. So that thing I was saying right at the beginning an hour ago about like resuscitating your space, changing it with the cycles, is equally as important for you and for your body coming into the space, if that makes sense. I feel like I've got really off piece there, but hopefully you get what I mean. I just saw that I think Marianne had dropped me a little message. Let me have a look somewhere I can read. Yeah, Marianne is saying, I really want to get some tuning forks. One of the things I really loved in the in-person sound baths. So obviously, it does always sound like I'm plugging Rock and Ritual in answer to these things. I have my little shop here in Newquay, Rock and Ritual, which is a place that I would hope that you could get most of the things I'm talking about. That's why I've given you guys a discount code, which I will send you after this. We are planning on getting tuning forks in there. And in the meantime, again, I've got a list of links I'm adding to as we go through for things that I need to follow up with. There's lots of different forms of tuning forks. The ones that you really want would be stainless steel. So it's good to be really mindful of the material. There's lots of cheap aluminium ones, which are out there on Amazon, which you can get, literally for a tenner. And they're fine, as a starting point, they're fine, but ideally a more resonant sound would come from the steel. The big thing with tuning forks is frequency. So one frequency that I think everyone can benefit from is 432 hertz. I don't know why I'm showing you a fork, but that's a 432 fork. All of the crystal bowls I've got here and most of my instruments, in fact, are tuned to 432, and that's because 432 is the universal frequency. It's the frequency of the Earth. It's the frequency that NASA get when they go and send a sonograph out into space, certainly into near space. So the reason we use 432 so much in sound healing is that when we come into that frequency, when we entrain with the frequencies that we're presented with, we're bringing ourselves into that balance and coming back into tune with nature. And all of this, I hope it's really clear now, all of this work, ritual, altar work, using all these different tools is in the end all about getting us to come back into nature, to balance our yin and yang, to balance all the elements in us so that we're able to receive and give to the world from a real place of peace and harmony. Rather than from a really polarized place where we're great in fire and rubbish in earth. Hopefully that's really clear now. So 432 hertz is a great way of bringing us into that, and that's why I always start any session I'm doing, whether it's sound healing or not, with 432 hertz bowls. So a 432 fork would generally set you back about £25. I usually start this one by activating it on you can use kind of your knee joint or your elbow or your wrist, or there's little kind of pucks that you can get. And just taking it around, for me, the crown is a really great place to start. Kind of combing it through. And it does have a sound. You probably can't hear it on the recording. But it's not a particularly loud sound. But as you will know, if you've practiced with me, sound is not about hearing. It's about experiencing. Feeling sounds. And the other couple I showed you earlier, the ones C and G, I would have probably used these for you, Marianne. Is about bringing, like a natural binaural beat, bringing our right and left brain into balance so that we are activating and using our intuitive, empathic, emotional body as well as our more tangible, physical, masculine, in a non-gendered way, body. I will pop some links of where you can get some tuning forks in the short term, and we will be stocking them in the shop, I hope, by March. So if anyone is particularly keen to use the ones I use, we'll be getting those in. They are a wonderful tool. Okay. Sound, I'm really conscious of running myself out of time and there's so much to do still. I just wanted to touch as a last thing for your altar on the scent, because it's such a biggie. And it's a really weird thing to be talking about because I currently don't have a sense of smell. So that's quite a curiosity. One of the reasons, actually, and it segues nicely from the sound, that I really love to work with scent and ritual, and I think many practitioners do, is that the same part of our brain that deals with sound and memory also deals with scent. It's one of the reasons that when we work with sound with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, for example, they really connect with smells alongside sound, and you can really plug people into a memory by kind of conjoining a sound or a frequency or a musical track or a melody and then adding a scent to that. And I'm sure if we actually all kind of dredge our memories, we all have examples of this. I can really remember like the Archers theme tune and the smell of Sunday lunch in my grand's house, for example. And that's, really kind of very very basic. A lot of people probably share those memories. But as soon as if I smell those two things individually, they're kind of individual. If I sense the smell and then that memory of that sound together, straight away it takes me back to that place. So it can be really interesting to have a think about where those connotations are for you. There's probably certain smells that really plug you into a person or a time of life. There's a candle I always used to have when I lived back in London in my home. And there was this little shop called Search and Rescue. I loved it. They had this amazing handle that I can't even remember what the make is anymore, but that smell always takes me back to that living room and that place, along with the sound of a particular track that I really associated because I had it as my wake up track every morning on my alarm. And it's such a powerful way to access memory, and again, to activate intuition. We can almost tune ourselves and plug ourselves into the kind of journey we want to go on by assigning scent to it. So again, if you've worked in person with me, you'll know that I always use scent. I always pass scents around. There's always incense and candles. They're never just candles. They've always got a scent, and they're usually ones I've made that I've tailored the scent to that particular time of year, cycle, zodiac sign, whatever we're working with in the practice. And then my intention from that is that when you connect with that scent later on, and perhaps listen back to the recording or to something similar, that's going to bring you back into that particular expansive meditation and help you get back to that place again, so you can keep on benefiting and learning from it. So it is a really interesting tool, and scent for me is so important. And it's been really interesting the last couple of weeks. I actually thought about whether I was going to mention it today because of not having scent at the moment. It's quite a strange experience to be without that particular sensory aspect right now, because it is so important to me, and it's been really highlighted how important it is by not having it. In fact, my sense of smell didn't go until about day 7 of being unwell, and I noticed it because I ran a bath and spent 10 minutes making all these lovely oils. I always kind of custom oils every time I have a bath, and suddenly it occurred to me I couldn't smell any of them, and I was there in the bathroom with my face like in the oils trying to work out what was happening, and called my partner and was like, Andy, I can't smell anything, what am I going to do? And it's really interesting how important it is to me. So I think because I know that it's for me one of the most powerful tools of coming back into ritual space. It also ties in so well with the idea of these seasons. So, in the same way that we might work, for example, with, Ayurveda, with seasonal cooking, with foraging, with lunar gardening. I just got my mum like a lunar gardening calendar for Christmas, and it's so interesting how certain fruits and vegetables at certain phases of the moon will be more responsive and will grow more in that light and that energy and that kind of frequency. So scent is a really beautiful way again of coming back into where are we now? What is this cycle offering us now? At the moment, we're not very floral. Everything is still underground. It's germinating, things are happening, but we're in a very earthy rather than floral phase. So a lot of the scents I work with at this time of year are often quite spicy. So it's earth that's dried. It's kind of it's almost no longer alive. It's moved on, like seeded. So things like coriander, for example, is something I use a lot in the winter. Resins, frankincense and myrrh are really good examples. Definitely all the smokes like tobaccos and oaks and leathers. They're all scents that are evocative, not so much of death as much as something that's old. It's at the end of its cycle. Which is where we are. As I was saying, for me, this isn't the new year, but it's kind of coming up to the new year as we move towards spring equinox. Obviously, when we get towards spring, some of those scents will lift. Woody, heavy scents don't feel really right in April and May. They don't feel great once we're coming into an energy of expansion and lightness. So instead of working with those, I'd be much more likely to bring some lighter florals in, maybe vetiver, some grasses, and some scents that kind of are evocative of dews and of liquid, of the return of water and of growth and nourishment, and maybe some early fires, some gentle warmth in a more herbal way rather than in a kind of really strong like chili or ginger way. And then in the summer, by contrast, I do often go to chilies and gingers and heating and kind of things that reflect the energy we're in. Lots of big florals, powerful florals like roses and geraniums. And it's, for me, again, a really beautiful way of reminding myself where we are in cycle. Often, if I'm using an oil or a scent on my altar, I'll try and get the corresponding flower or plant and bring that as well. So it's a constant reminder of where we are and how to get in flow. I do work a lot with oil, pulse point oils, a bit of a knackered old one, which I love to use in meditation, just across. So weird when I'm to smell this. Trying to take this across my wrist, for example, often down the neck or into the temples. And then before I begin my meditation, I'll usually just keep the scent in front of my face, take a few really deep breaths to really plug that into the olfactory nerve and the olfactory senses, and then really allow that scent to kind of spread around my aura, so that as I'm in meditation or in journey or just sitting or journaling, we don't have to be always in practice, but the practice can be just being present in this space. I'm really mindful that there's this connection of this scent. Other ways I might use it is diluting oils with some floral water or just distilled water and spritzing my grid. That's a really nice way to cleanse your crystals. Baths, obviously. So I generally will mix up a blend or choose a combination of oils at the beginning of a lunar cycle. It's a new moon in Capricorn. I made my Capricorn blend, and that's what's on my altar and my roller. It's what I'm using in baths at this time. And then I'll keep staying with that until we get to the end of this lunar cycle. Then I'll refine the recipe and shift it as we move to Aquarius. So you could think about doing that, maybe if you wanted to change it monthly or with the moons, or just longer form with the seasons. Not to do a disservice to my own business or practice, but it's not enormously hard to blend essential oils. You can easily do that yourself and come up with things that suit you personally, your own custom blend, your own perfume. I like to work with coconut oil or argan oil as a base, which you can get really easily in health food shops, and then add a few drops of essential oil to those as a base. You can use them for massage. It can be really nice, especially if you do womb work, to introduce oils to the body as well. Obviously being mindful if you have heart conditions or are pregnant. And I also work with oils on the altar. You can see my little singing bowl here. It's actually got some water in it, so this is currently representing the water element for me. And I've got a few little oils in there which I'm using almost like a natural diffuser in this space at the moment. So always lots of ways you can tune in to ritual with scent, and obviously you can make yourself a scent and wear it whatever you like, not just in your sacred space, which for me is also another way of connecting, that scent back to a ritual, back to presence, back to awareness, and keep me plugged into my journey when I'm outside of this space as well as when I'm in it. So, any questions on scent? I guess incense is another thing to mention that we always have. I just realised I haven't got my candle lit. Incenses and candles on the go. And again, your incense can be stick incense, it can be like resins, it can literally be plants, and I work a lot with these herb bundles that you can see, which are simply dried herbs ready to burn, and they can be used really easily for cleansing as well. People tend to, I haven't even got any sage actually, people tend to move towards white sage a lot, and there's always a place for white sage, but I do think there is so many other ways that we can work with herbs. We do try to work in the shop with local herbs and herbs that respect our own indigenous territory rather than ones that are always imported. So, next time you're out for a walk with your dog or just on a Sunday afternoon, have a look at the herbs local to you. What grows naturally where you live? What is the proliferation of? What can you forage potentially? The general rule of thumb is never to take more than 30% of what's there. But what can you forage locally? What's your land offering you to work with, and what can you dry at home? It's also really nice to grow herbs in pots, and I'm the worst at growing. I kill things all the time, terrible with houseplants. But I do manage to keep a rosemary plant going, because rosemary is so purifying, so clearing, really good for the lungs and the higher heart space. And I do generally have a few sprigs of rosemary that I've grown in my own garden, woven through the altar as well. And that really connects this space to here, to home, and to to my sacred space. So that's also really nice to have a think about what you can get locally to you. Okay. So, questions on scent. No. All right, guys. I think we're nearly there, but I feel like I need a breath, so you guys must need a breath. So, let your eyes come to a close just for a moment. And take a really big breath in through the nose. Feeling all the way up until the air is up in your neck and sending your jaw up to the sky, and then a big noisy sigh. Breathing in. Maybe a little shake out of the shoulders. Letting things move around a bit, and all that kind of loads of information and talk and words that are all sitting around you, just kind of shake off you, and the ones that you need will always stick, I promise. Okay, so before we go on to the last little bit of talking I wanted to share with you, which is about astrology, key dates and transits. If anyone has any questions about what I've talked about in terms of how to work with scent, with crystals, with tarot and oracle cards, or anything else that you might see or have heard me talk about in terms of altar work, let me know, because I feel like I've been a bit sporadic with how I've introduced all of that to you. So if you feel like you want any more detail on anything, or if you want to ask me later, of course you can, but by all means jump into the chat and let me know now, because I feel like I'm a little bit floaty in my delivery today. so let me know if anything pops up for you. The last couple of things I wanted to talk to you about, and we did mention it very briefly earlier, is Reiki and self-Reiki and astrology. So I often find myself explaining to people when I say I've got this lovely ritual space, my IKEA altar, and my crystals and all my sounds and my journals and so on, but what do you do with it? When like I said at the beginning, I don't necessarily always do anything. Often I come and I sit here and I might listen to a recorded meditation, or I do my own meditation. I often come to my journal, and you can see I have a lot of journals. I weirdly find journaling really hard a lot of the time. I think my brain goes a bit too quickly. And I use different journals for different things. I have one which is a one-word journal. I set myself the challenge of writing one word each day. So I usually do it at the end of the day. I try and do it before bed, or if I forget, I do it the next morning when I come in here for the morning. And that's really about my takeaway energy for the day. So over the course of a month, I can see my patterning, and I can understand how, if I need to kind of reassess, if I'm kind of staying in a rut for quite a while, or if I'm staying really high and not taking breathers. I've got other journals where I will respond only to my cards. So I've got kind of a tarot journal where I write a few words in response to whatever I've pulled from the deck each day. And then I've got one which is just a blank page journal, and that one is entirely for free writing. So usually I set an alarm on my phone, I let it run for 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes, and just put my pen on the paper. And a really good challenge is to not take your pen off the paper, to not allow yourself that moment of kind of gazing and tapping, and simply just write and see what comes out. And if you've never done that free writing journaling, especially if the whole concept of writing anything down seems a bit challenging or frustrating, or like for me, my hands are all arthritic and my hand gets tired, I always have reasons not to do it. It's actually a really, really beautiful way of connecting with your kind of innermost journey and innermost thoughts, because when you're in a place where they're kind of like in therapy, where they've been drawn out of you, you simply find yourself looking at a page almost that you didn't remember writing. It's almost pure channeling. And if you're working towards your psychic energies, it is a great way of getting that psychic channel on, where actually information's coming from up here and out on the paper, and you're kind of just a pathway. You're not necessarily thinking or processing the information. If that makes sense, that's a really, really lovely practice. And twin to that, Reiki. So I know some of you may be Reiki attuned watching this now or later. Reiki broadly is universal energy of source, of oneness, of consciousness. Ancient Japanese art and tradition, and there's a few different variations, but broadly they kind of come back to that traditional Japanese cultural signposting. And I'm a Sui Reiki trained, which is very much the hands-on Reiki. And the really beautiful thing with Reiki is that you don't need to do very much to access it. You may already be aware of the tuning, even if you haven't had it professionally kind of opened and accessed for you by a master. So a good way to check is to do what I'm doing now. Hold your hands in front of you and just close your eyes and see if you can feel into the center of your palms. And can you notice any tingling or activity? Can you feel any heat? Really focus on the center of your palms. And if you think you can't feel anything, then if you have now or later any crystals around, then maybe you can do it and try with a crystal and see if that helps you activate something. There's a podcast I'll recommend in the notes, which actually I just heard go live today, featuring a Reiki colleague of mine talking about the art of self-Reiki, and I'm going to recommend that to expand on what I'm about to say. The podcast is called Magic and Mindfulness, and self-Reiki is really about taking the energy that you can feel in your palms and sending it back into yourself, back to your body. So really almost kind of rinsing yourself out with universal energy. So if you can feel that tingle, that activation in your palms, maybe you could now take both hands across your chest. And you can maybe hover them just above, or if you want to place them down, you can. And imagine that tingle, that energy moving through your palms now, through the connection point with your physical form, and sending healing light and energy wherever those hands are placed. And notice how that makes you feel. Maybe you suddenly find that you are sensing a word or an image or a colour, something really comes to you really strongly, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it feels very physical. And maybe there's nothing at all. But self-Reiki is an amazing gift that we can give ourselves with very little attunement. You know, you need a little bit of training, of course, to administer Reiki energy to a third party, but for yourself, you really only need to see a Reiki master for your level 1 to go and receive the activation that will allow you to harness this energy and to sit by your ritual space or sacred space, or even in bed. I often do it in the bath, and simply call in your channel and send that energy to wherever you need it. It's my nose at the moment, a lot. And sometimes if I feel like I'm not going to write, or even a card feels quite a lot, then that's a really beautiful way to come into your sacred space and just be with yourself and your form and your energy. Okay. Last little bit before we get to some sounds. So, astrology, one of my favourite things to go on and on about. Right. So, whilst all of my work is underpinned by the shamanic calendar and the wheel, we have, I can't think of the word, kind of like concentric circles piled in on top of each other, and all of the dials moving at slightly different times and in slightly different speeds. So at any time there's an alignment between all of the different calendars and wheels that we could be looking at and what's actually going on in the world. So for example, the shamanic calendar, which I mentioned, we have Imbolc coming up, spelled Imbolc, people often get confused, is February the 1st, and that's the kind of the first sight of spring. So we're not necessarily even seeing much out there physically in the world, but the analogy, the representation is the idea that snowdrops are just beginning to pop through the frozen earth and break that frozen earth down. So from Imbolc we then have spring equinox, and Imbolc is in fact halfway between, it's called a cross-quarter festival, it's halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So shamanic calendar is underpinned by the 2 solstices, June and December, and then the 2 equinoxes, which are in March and September. And then in between each of them, halfway between each, there is a cross-quarter festival. So we end up with 8 wheel festivals of the year. So even if you wanted to work in a really kind of longer form way, those 8 wheel festivals, which are all 6 or so weeks apart, is a really good way of just connecting with a gentle shift in seasons. So on top of this wheel of the shamanic calendar, and the pagan and Wiccan ones are very similar, by the way, there's slightly different names depending on which calendar you're reading, but the dates broadly are the same. On top of that, we can put the astrological calendar, which does kind of fit in as well. You know, all of kind of the ancient traditions and ancient cultures knew what we have tried to ignore. You know, it never fails to amaze me that, you know, in the modern world we made this calendar that gives us January the 1st, and gives us these real structures, whereas actually all the different cultures and traditions across the world already had calendars that worked. We just made a new one. Um, so the astrological calendar also starts from spring equinox. Really, it starts from the first sign of the zodiac, which is Aries, and when the sun moves into Aries on March the 20th, the spring equinox, depending on the few bits of physics with the exact angle of the sun, will generally always fall within a day or two of that. As we move through the first three signs of the zodiac, through Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, we're in that kind of youthful, early sort of sense of development, and then sort of blooming through the summer, kind of shedding through the autumn, and through those transformation signs, kind of ending with Scorpio, and then we move into the winter of kind of hibernation where we are now with Capricorn, which is so much about finding our roots and our ground. So we have this beautiful flow that runs through the year. On top of the zodiac calendar, we have the lunar calendar, which is around 29 and a half days between each transition, underpinned by the new and the full moons, of course, that cycle of moving from dark to light. And we can always celebrate the new moon. Ideally, it's normally quite early. Again, there's some physics that change every year, but when the new moon falls early in a sign, it kind of aligns us a little more easily with the solar energy as well. So, for example, we had a new moon in Capricorn on January the 2nd, which fell really well for the beginning of the year. So I really like to look at kind of all of these calendars together, not only what's happening astrologically, but what's happening with the lunar calendar and what's happening with the shamanic calendar. You might find that actually only one of these makes sense for you, or none of them do. There's something else that works for you. But one of the things I want to really encourage is that you don't have to just look at one. My practice personally has been maybe quite chaotic, but I also really like to draw from many different ideas and traditions, because I do think they all intersect and they weave together so beautifully in the end. What can I say to try and bring astrology into focus easily for you? So I guess there's two big aspects to astrology. There's natal astrology, which is the astrology of a being. So your natal chart is the chart of the skies at the moment you were born. And then there's mundane astrology, which is the astrology of kind of the world. So in a way, objective and subjective astrology. It's the astrology of individuals and the astrology of kind of the prevailing energy. And for me, the most interesting thing is how these two connect and the relationship between them. So at the moment, for example, we're in big retrograde energy out there. Venus is retrograde, Mercury just went retrograde on Friday. So retrogrades we'll touch on in a moment, but are really times of reflection, of review, of pause, of going back over old ground and just checking how we feel about it, checking what lessons might need to be called forth that maybe we missed first time. So when we're in a lot of retrograde energy and the mundane side of things, the world is quite retrograde right now, we can then intersect that with what our own astrology is doing. What's happening on your natal chart? How is what's going on out there affecting what's going on in here? And then how is that conversation happening in context of where we are in the wheel? Are we in spring? Are we in winter? So one of the reasons I wanted to share this workshop now is that I feel we're all in a period of reflection because of the ongoing mundane astrology, and because that's placed at the beginning of the year in Capricorn season where we want to do something, but actually the energy is about going inwards. That's why this is a really good time for this work. So although it all looks a bit kind of made up, it's actually all intersects really perfectly together. Does that make some sense? I hope so. So if you do know your astrology really well, I know some of you really are very tuned into it. You probably already have your chart. If you don't, there'll be links and places where you can find it in the notes. And the thing that's really interesting in your chart is to know what's going on your chart, like what's going on in terms of planets, and then where is it happening, which part of your life. So for example, at the moment we're in Capricorn season, so the first thing you would do is look at where Capricorn falls on your chart. Which area of life does that rule? So for example, I'm a Capricorn rising, so for me it's my first house, which is the big important one in terms of self and personality and identity. So all of the retrograde action we currently have that's going on in Capricorn for me is really about my literally seed of self, which is why I've kind of gone to ground this month to really try and do that work, because for me it's very inward work. If your Capricorn happens to be your 7th house, then that's the relationships house, and it's the house of your relationship to you and one other. So this would be a really good time to be reviewing that relationship work in terms of your marriage, your partnership, or your business partnership, or your relations when you're one-on-one with your nearest and dearest. So you can really refine how you interpret what's going on between the internal astrology and the big global astrology. And there's lots of people that specialise in both. I really like to look at both together because I think we can learn a lot more from that. But sometimes it's really nice just to focus individually or to look at kind of the bigger picture. I do in my newsletter every month give you a breakdown of all the key transits that are going on month to month. So if that's something that interests you, there's many places you can get it, but it's something I always cover, and I do always generally plug all of my events in kind of correspondence with those key dates, and connecting with those key energies so we can together journey through the year and go through the learnings and the integrations of each of those. So, solar and lunar seasons. The sun season is when the sun moves into a sign, and it's there for about a month. So for now we're in Capricorn. The sun moves into the next sign, which is Aquarius, on the 20th of January. And that's really what, that's what rules what we often call your star sign. So those are the ones we tend to know easily. The lunar season is 29.5 days. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So we've got constant change with the lunar cycle. That's why I love it so much. Even if you're in a real funk, you never really have to wait more than a couple of days for the moon to change signs and really shift the emotional landscape. And I can see a couple of you nodding with that. And it's really one of the things for me that's so reassuring about ritual work. I can sit at this altar and be having a really rubbish day, not get into meditation, break a crystal bowl. I do it all the time. Everything feels really frustrating. But I know that if I just look at the lunar astrology, it will only take a couple of days for the vibration just to shift enough for me to approach this space and my work in it in a different way. Big transits to note coming up early this year. And again, one of the reasons I really wanted to do this workshop, and I'm doing a lot more like it in the next few months that are quite bigger picture rather than too much detail, is that the astrology is showing us we're in this period of reflection and kind of integration really for quite a while at the front end of this year. The big shift is Jupiter. Jupiter went into Pisces on December the 29th. Jupiter and Pisces have a rulership, so Jupiter's very comfortable in Pisces. And what Jupiter and Pisces is all about is that the Jupiter energy, which is positivity, abundance, luck, expansion, it's like a growth energy, in Pisces, which is spirituality, psychic energy, insight, intuitive wisdom. So Jupiter in Pisces is about kind of really expanding our spiritual work, discovering the rituals that will work for us and how we access our higher intuitive calling. And that's really why I wanted to talk to you today. Jupiter will be in Pisces until May, mid-May, I think it's about the 16th. So we've really got from now, from end of December until May, to spend time in expansion in this spiritual intuitive self. It's not that the guillotine suddenly comes down in May, but in May, Jupiter moves to Aries, which is an active fire energy. So really the way we can interpret this, and that most of certainly my teachers and trusted sources are, and how I feel as well, is that we're really spending these first 4 months of the year in quite an internal state, really about self-discovery, about exploration, about trying out different ways of working with our intuition and our psychic channel. And then when we get to May, the call will be to really activate those, to go out there in the world and use them, perhaps sharing or teaching or being out there more in the group environment, perhaps doing some training. But that won't be an internal time. At that point, everything goes external, and it's how we're showing up outside of ourselves. So really, this is a beautiful gift of the first part of the year, to have this big energy in support of our inner work. We're also in retrograde. I've mentioned a couple of times already. Venus is retrograde. Venus has been retrograde since December 19th and will be until the end of this month. It's a fairly long retrograde for Venus. It's Venus in retrograde is so much about relationships and about how we love ourselves as well as the people in our lives, how we deal with beauty and the sweet things that give us joy. So a lot of that again comes back to our practice, to our ritual, to our altar. This altar gives me joy because it's a safe and beautiful space. I try to keep it looking nice even when the cat gets up there and causes trouble. So it's really a retrograde in Venus is about reviewing all those things that give you beauty and love in your life. We've also got retrograde Mercury, which started Friday, runs till February 3rd. And Mercury retrograde is all about communication. Again, stopping, going back in our cycle, looking over how we've been communicating, how we've been speaking our truth, telling our story, and how that's working and what we might need to shift going forwards. both of these retrogrades are in Capricorn. In fact, Mercury's in Aquarius, moving back to Capricorn. So they're very much about then how we tangibly put that out into the world. They're really tangible retrogrades, very earthy. So overall, the vibe is internalize, reset, explore, work out how we're doing things in the world, how we're showing up in the world. And then when we come to that big Jupiter shift in May, we can go out there and actually deliver. So particularly if you're a coach or a healer or a practitioner and you're moving towards new courses, new offerings, launching a new retreat or a program, it's not to say that you have to wait until a certain date in May, but definitely this is a great energy to capitalize on at the beginning of the year. Again, which is why I wanted to really just offer something to give people a chance to connect with different rituals, different ways of working, different ways of tapping into their intuition, whether it be cards or crystals or sound or anything else we've touched on. So, just thinking what else I need to tell you. We have a full moon coming up in a couple of days. Full moon in Cancer on the 17th of January is a really gentle and nourishing full moon. Full moons often have a bad rep for being hectic and high energy, which they really can be, and we've had a few really big ones in a row with all the eclipses, but this one's a real lovely gentle one. Cancer is the highly sensitive sign of nurturing, of motherhood, of the home. So again, this sign, this full moon, is really about nurturing our home space, exhibit A. You'll see why all of the whichever cycle or wheel or calendar we look at, all kind of energies are pointing to this internalized reviewing energy right now. We have February the 1st, Imbolc, as I mentioned, which is not astrological, but a key date in the calendar in terms of that spring shift. It also happens to be the Chinese New Year, and it's the day of the new moon in Aquarius. So that's a big date to work with in a couple of weeks from now. I'll be doing an event on that, of course, and it's very much tapping into the prevailing energy of the last couple of years and of the decades to come, which is Aquarian ascension energy, the collective becoming, collectively enlightened, collectively awakened. A lot of people going through big shifts and big connections with their higher selves simultaneously. So whenever we come into Aquarius season now and for the next decade and beyond, this is always going to be kind of a little quantum acceleration of this energy, of this 5D development. So definitely a good time to be activating whatever's coming up for you in these first few weeks of the year. Most of the planets start moving out of Capricorn, so it's worth mentioning Venus and Mercury are always slightly more important astrologically because they move quicker, we get more transits with them, so their changes, their impact is more frequent. The outer planets only change signs with much less regularity, so when they do it's big, but they don't do it that often. We have got Uranus changing signs early in February, or Uranus going direct rather after a retrograde period. So Uranus is about rebellion and shocks and surprises. Usually when Uranus is very active, things tend to come out of the blue for us, and we had a big patch of that in late November that you may have felt a few waves in the force. But generally, the astrology of the first quarter of the year is actually quite still. It's very internal. It's really asking us to spend time exploring the relationship between our own spiritual development and then how we put that out there in the world, how we tangibly live that, how we show up for ourselves, whether or not we're showing up for other people in this world, but how we're creating physical spaces to do this work, hence Rituals Workshop. So I really encourage you to have a look over this couple of months at how you connect to your practice, your spirituality, how you want to show up going forward, how do you want your days to look, how do you want to feel when you come into this sacred space. And whether it's a shed or a whole studio or a wine box in the corner as mine was for so long, it doesn't need to be anything fancy, it just needs to be yours and something that resonates for you. So I hope somewhere in what feels like loads of talking at you, you've picked up a few bits and pieces there that will support you on your journey in this first quarter of the year. And if anyone's got any questions right now, let me know before we have a little break and move towards some sound, because it's always, for me, really important, and I guess part of my ongoing ritual is that whatever I'm teaching, talking about, studying, learning, seeking myself, I usually find that whenever I've completed a chapter or a journey, if I sit with the sound, that really is where I integrate, and the things that I need come into land, and the things that maybe are not for me right now just release. So I know I've shared lots of information today. Might be a little overwhelming, especially if you're watching this back with a little less context. So we will move into some sounds, and I promise the right things. One plug in to our second part of our rituals workshop, and we're going to spend about 45 minutes in the sounds together, simply integrating what we've been learning today about the many different ways that we can connect with ritual practice as we move into 2022. We have got so many tools at our disposal and so many different ways that we can connect intuitively and psychically and spiritually with our own soul, with our well-being, with our self-development. And I feel that although we often seesaw out of different types of ritual and different types of practice, it's really wonderful when we can find something that we personally connect to that always brings us back to source. And for me, that has always been sound, and I'm always really so happy to be able to share that with you. So we're going to move through a little sound bath now, possibly a little bit shorter than advertised, partly because of time and partly because of my own energy levels. And I really encourage you to take deep rest wherever you are, to relax into your body, into your spirit and soul, and to find yourself a place of deep rest and relaxation and restoration, where hopefully all the learnings that you need from your work today will land just perfectly. So I'll invite you to take a deep breath wherever you are, in through the nose, out through the mouth in a soft sigh. And a couple more deep belly breaths. Really softening into the body, getting any kinks and rough edges filed and gently sanded down, maybe seeing if you can be a little more comfortable, a little more relaxed in your body. Can you soften the muscles in the back of your shoulders? Can you soften the muscles in your face? Can you let your feet roll outwards, allowing the hips, the pelvis to open? As you soften into your body, your earthly vessel, perhaps you can call in an intention or a guiding mantra or statement, something to help anchor your sound journey this afternoon. Perhaps a commitment to ritual or devotion in some new method or practice. Perhaps a reaffirmation of a vow you've already made to yourself, or perhaps no resolution or intention at all, simply presence, commitment to being. you are in your body and your mind and your practice. Gently bringing some small movements back to your fingers and toes, to your spine, wherever feels natural to connect and reintroduce that physical form. And even a relatively short or small amount of sound can be really profound for the frequencies and the vibrations of the body. So much can be shifted with so little. It's part of the magic of nature. And there's so many ways we can connect in our practice, in our bodies, in our minds. And I hope this little exploration this afternoon, which has felt a little bit more like a seminar than I intended, was giving you some things to go away and work with, some ideas of what you might bring into your practice, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly, whether or not you are called into stillness, maybe with scent and oils, or you like to move and be active with shaking and embodiment or free writing, or that some of these many different tools will resonate for you in some way. So I wish you all a beautiful, not quite new year, and I hope to be back with you when I'm back to full power and able to hold a bigger, more coherent space for you, and we will meet again. I plan to do some online workshops throughout each of the shamanic wheel dates this year, so I look forward to seeing you at one of those soon. Sending much love and bright blessings for a beautiful week ahead.